Here we go.
Good evening. We are going to call the Novi Board of Education regular meeting to order. Today is Thursday, January 23rd. If we can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I can get a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved. Support.
Recommended by Mr. Mena and supported by Mr. Cook. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. First up, we have our Student Board Representative Report. Welcome, Cameron.
Mrs. Ruskin, thank you for having me. So yeah, actually quite a lot has been happening in the past month or since the last time I've been here. And so first off, Happy New Year to everybody. And I want to start off by talking about the new Interactivities Council that Mr. Tobis is doing at the high school. And so obviously there's a lot of different clubs who are Novi with us having like so many different opportunities. And he's making a club to connect the different clubs from the different schools, basically. And so the first meeting is going to take place this next month in advisory. And that's like something very big to look forward to. So like some things that's like including like different student councils and making them bridge together and like think about how to really better Novi throughout all the different schools as one. And so things like that and all sorts of different clubs. And so that would be number one. And then number two, prom planning has started for the junior class of student council. They have been very excited, but I mean planning prom is planning prom. And so that's been like a very big focus for StuCo as a whole, and that's like really nice to like see because I know our class had to plan it last year, and so being able to like reflect on what we did, what to do, and that's been like really nice. And so that was prom is a lot, but yeah. So there's that, and then we also have a new program that we're implementing called Rise and Shine. We as a student council, I worked with Annika Patel, like my not assistant, I feel like that's not really what she is. But it's just like, we worked together on this report, and so she was letting me know about a lot of like what StuCo's doing. And so this whole program is allowing high school students to like kind of communicate about all the different things they've learned through leadership conferences and implement the content into like activities for middle school students, basically. And so that's like a new like obviously thing that we're planning, and that's gonna be really, really exciting. Program consists of 2 sessions, which would be the first one on January 9th, and then we have one in March, which hasn't been planned all the way yet. And middle schoolers will be coming to the high school, and then certain student council members will get like speak to them and educate them on like kind of do's and don'ts and like what to do as in like, you know, as a Novi student, how to be a good leader and to follow that. And then I was also asked to talk about thank you for the 2 days extra we had off. I couldn't have the meeting and not thank you all for that. That was people were very excited. I as in people, because I was very excited. And so I remember getting the phone call and getting an email through Final Forms. My coach was like, "All right, guys, practice later in the day." I'm like, "No morning practice and 2 days off." It was great. And so I want to say thank you for that. And yeah, overall, new semester started today. From everybody I've talked to, whether that be at the high school, middle school, and people from Village Oaks too, it's been like a good change. You know, second semester, people are always more excited to go in the second semester than they are first. And so people got the whole schedule down, and it's nice. And so definitely positive attitudes going into the new semester.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for everything. I bet you're real excited because this is your last semester. Is that right?
Yes. This is my last one as a Novi student.
Well, good. Enjoy the next 4 months. But thank you for that report. Does anybody have any questions? No? We appreciate you being here, and Happy New Year to you too.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we are going to move on to reports to the board. We have 2 reports this evening, and we'll start with FOIA, FERPA, and OMA. Mr. Micah.
Alrighty, thank you. We every year have committed to doing an annual refresher training related to FOIA, OMA, FERPA, and a variety of other topics that are relevant to the board. And so I know that many of you know Jennifer Starlin. She's our attorney who works for Troon Law Firm, and she has agreed to come and provide us our refresher course tonight. So I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
All right, good evening, everybody. I had the presentation. Does it go up on that screen or?
Yep.
Oh, look at you just had.
It's like magic. You just
It is. Just say what I need. Good to see everybody again. So this will be a true refresher for some of you who've heard me come here year after year, but I understand we have at least one new face on the board. So we're going to talk really briefly about OMA, FOIA, and FERPA. I always have to start by saying we could spend a couple of hours on each of these topics. I did get Ben to let me go beyond the 3 minutes for public comment for purposes of this presentation. However, we're not going to dive into all of the ins and outs of this, but just kind of so everybody has a functional working knowledge of these important laws that do impact the board. Now, if you've ever been to a Troon presentation, I know some of you have, we always put our custom caution slide on, which my partners make me say, I'm a lawyer, I'm talking about the law, but this isn't legal advice. So obviously, the law might apply to different situations differently. Also, the law changes sometimes. We're seeing a lot of that right now with the legislature and at the federal level. So if you pull this handout out in 5 years, just make sure nothing's changed before you rely too heavily on it. So we're going to start with the Open Meetings Act and some of the basics with OMA as it's referred to. The Open Meetings Act and FOIA are what are commonly known as sunshine laws. And the purpose of them is to shine light on the inner workings of the government. As an elected public body, you're not supposed to make secret decisions because the people who've elected you have a right to understand how decisions are being made, and so that the general public can participate in those issues that are of public concern. So the operative language of the Open Meetings Act is if it's a meeting of a public body, it has to be open to the public. That means the door has to be unlocked, so that's good, we're at a good start, and it has to be held in a place that's generally available to the public as well. It also, to be open to the public, has to have proper notice and posting. If it's just a secret meeting, even if the doors are unlocked, if the public doesn't know about it, it's not going to meet the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. Generally held in a place available to the general public. There are provisions under the OMA that allow meetings in residential dwellings in some circumstances, but nobody has ever volunteered to have their home be the site of a public meeting. So I don't know that will be an actual question that I ever get in my career. Everybody's allowed to attend an open meeting unless they are excluded from that meeting for a breach of the peace at that meeting. We'll talk a little bit more about this. And to be an open meeting, it has to have the opportunity for public comment. Public body is defined by the statute, but for your purposes, it does include a school board, which is why I'm talking about this law, because it does apply to you. It doesn't apply to an individual acting in an executive capacity. So Ben's meetings don't have to be held in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. He's effectively the executive of the school district. He doesn't have to post every time he has a meeting with a parent or a staff member or students, thankfully, because that would get very messy. But the board, as the head of as the public body itself, does have to hold meetings in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. Now, committees are a pretty hot topic. And it's an area where I often caution boards to tread carefully. Because whether or not a committee that is undertaking a function of the board has to have its meetings posted in compliance with the Open Meetings Act really depends on what type of authority that committee has. If they're doing all of the work and the board just rubber stamps their decisions, the board has probably delegated one of its functions to that committee, and it may be that committee then has to hold its meetings in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. That's a really fact-specific inquiry, and when I get that question from clients, I ask about 25 questions about what does the committee do, who's on it, what would the board typically do in this role, how does the board respond to this, what do their meetings look like. So something to keep in mind with committees is just to be careful, because you really want to make sure that we're not delegating board functions to a committee, or if we are, that those meetings are being held in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. And if the board asks for input or recommendations from somebody who's not on the board, that doesn't violate the Open Meetings Act as long as the board discusses that input, discusses those recommendations, and then makes a decision in open session. So it would be okay to say, hey, we consulted with an outside consultant and they shared that, here's some steps that we should take on this, and the board discusses that. Then the meeting with the consultant, assuming that it wasn't with a quorum of the board, doesn't necessarily have to be held in compliance with the OMA, because that would just be a recommendation that the board is thoroughly vetting at the board level. Conferences and workshops, you can, board members, if a quorum of you go to the MASB conference, for example, you're not violating the Open Meetings Act as long as you're not going and having little meetings off to the side to discuss school business. If you were there to learn, or if you come to a Troon training session, for example, or one of our webinars, just the fact that a quorum of the board happens to be in the same place doesn't mean that you're violating the Open Meetings Act, but do take care not to, like I said, go off to the side and say, hey, let's talk about this issue that the school board's gonna be asked to discuss. It should stick to what is the content of the conference, or how are your kids doing, or other things that aren't board business. Meeting means when a quorum of the public body convenes for the purpose of deliberating toward or rendering a decision on public policy. This is commonly called round robining, and that is prohibited. That's if you have, back in the day, probably when this case came out, it was the phone call chain. Board member 1 calls board member 2, what do you think about this? Calls board member 3, what do you think about this? And on and on. And then there's deliberation occurring outside of the public meeting. Today, in 2025, we see this more commonly in the reply all email, because somebody sends an email, somebody else replies all, and before we know it, others are chiming in, and you could really easily fall into deliberating outside of a public meeting. So I always caution boards to be really careful with email. I've sent emails to boards many times. I start it with, please don't reply all. I can probably count on one hand the number of times I haven't gotten an inadvertent reply, which might just even be thank you for the information, but just be really careful about that. I know one thing that some schools do is when, for example, the superintendent wants to push out information to the board, blind copying the entire board so that you can't reply all sometimes can be an effective strategy, just to avoid that, because it happens accidentally, and sometimes that can become problematic. Electronic meetings. A little bit of an interesting history here. Until COVID, so pre-COVID, there was a presumption based on an attorney general opinion that boards could have electronic meetings, or board members could participate via phone, or I think the AG opinion actually refers to interactive television, which we would probably consider Zoom or similar now. In 2020, when COVID happened and we could not physically meet, the legislature specifically carved out some ways that electronic meetings could be held. But there were different provisions within that law that have since sunset. And now the only way that we can have a board member attend a public meeting electronically is if they are absent due to military duty. So now in 2025, it's interesting that the rules about participating electronically are actually more restrictive than they were back in the 90s, even though we have tools to allow that electronic communication more better, in a better way. And we actually know how to use it now, post-COVID. Military duty is not defined in the Open Meetings Act, but generally understood to mean deployment, either domestic or international. Only the absent member can attend remotely, and there are some additional rules and procedures that apply to those electronic meetings if somebody is going to be attending electronically. Now, we've seen a couple of bills introduced over the years to kind of allow more options for electronic meetings, when somebody can't make it for whatever reason, but we haven't gotten a lot of traction on those. There was recently an attorney general opinion from the state of Michigan that talked about you may also need to use the electronic meeting provisions if somebody has a disability that needs to be accommodated. And in that case, we're going to be doing kind of an Americans with Disabilities Act and Open Meetings Act analysis to determine what the obligations are. But electronic meetings largely are not going to be the norm with our boards. The public also has rights at the meeting. The public has the right to attend a meeting. They probably won't actually tape record it. I think we don't use tape recorders anymore, but that's what the statute says. But any way that they want to record it, video it, broadcast it, or telecast it, as long as it's not disruptive to the meeting itself. And that is the public's right to do. Public comment has to occur at each open meeting, and the public body can set rules related to public comment. You can require a speaker to register. You can't require an attendee to register. So you can't condition attendance at a public board meeting on tell me your name and where you live. You can ask a speaker for purposes of identifying for the minutes who spoke, what their name is, and require them to register or to identify themselves. You can place reasonable limits on the duration of each comment, and the board determines when during the meeting public comment occurs. So beginning, middle, end, that's up to the board. Now, the reasonable rules that you're allowed to put in place for purposes of public comment, they have to be reasonable, they have to be flexible, and the point of them should be to encourage public expression and not discourage or prohibit it. There is one, I believe it's an Attorney General opinion, talking about the length of a public comment period. You can say for example, each person who wants to speak to the board has 3 minutes. You can't say we close public comment after 30 minutes if other people want to speak. So the trend, again, going towards openness in the government and hearing from the public, is to make sure that anyone who has something that they want to say, who's here at the appropriate time in the meeting when public comment occurs, is able to, within their 3 or 5 minutes or whatever they receive, share that with the board. Now, you cannot exclude a person from attending a meeting unless they commit a breach of the peace at the meeting. And I have gotten this question before. Even if the same person comes to the meeting and breaches the peace at every meeting and gets removed at every meeting, you still have to give them another chance at the next meeting. And, hope springs eternal that will be the one where that doesn't happen. But when somebody is excluded from the meeting, they are only excluded from that particular meeting. And it has to be for a breach of the peace that's committed at the meeting. All meetings of a public body have to be open to the public, and in order to get into closed session, one of those exemptions applies. But even when you go into closed session, that can only happen if you first are at an open meeting. So even if the only thing on the agenda is a closed session, you would call the meeting to order, you would have probably the pledge, public comment at some point, and the closed session. So you can't just have a closed session meeting without having the open session counterpart. And the exemptions for the reasons to go into closed session, again, will be construed by a court narrowly in the interest of ensuring transparency and that the public understands what's going on. Now, all decisions have to be made at a meeting open to the public. So even if there is a statutory basis to go into closed session, the board can only deliberate in closed session. Say, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Let's talk about the pros and cons. The final decision needs to be made during the open portion of the meeting so that the public can hear what is happening and what decisions the public body is making. So that was kind of the 50,000-foot view on the OMA. I don't know if there's any quick questions. If you want to ask questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about FOIA, my other favorite sunshine statute. Okay. All right. So FOIA is the acronym for the Freedom of Information Act. You've probably heard that term used before. Like the OMA, it is a sunshine law, which means there is a pro-disclosure presumption. So we start with the idea that every record of the public body is open to the public and available to the public. That's the presumption. Any papers, any voice memos, any video recordings, any emails, we start with the idea that all of it's public, the public can see it all. To withhold something from the public in whole or in part, you have to be able to rely on one of the statutory exemptions in Section 13 of FOIA. So you have to be able to cite to, this is the specific basis for not releasing this information. We'll talk about a couple of those. A FOIA request, it doesn't have to be on any particular form, but it does have to identify the public record that the person is seeking. And as of a couple years ago, also has to include the requester's full name and postal mailing address. That was an addition that was added, I think about 7 years ago to the Michigan FOIA, and that is now a requirement for any FOIA request. But they can come via email, they can get hand delivered, they can get faxed. The medium in which it's transmitted doesn't matter, it doesn't change whether or not it's a FOIA request. So some of the exemptions, some of the reasons that you either would be allowed to withhold information or required to withhold information. The common exemptions for schools I have up on the screen. The first one is anything that is protected by FERPA, which we'll talk about in just a couple slides. That is a federal law, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and it protects student privacy and student records. So this is an area where FOIA says you cannot disclose FERPA protected information. Some of the other information in there, like the personal nature, information of a personal nature, that you can withhold, but you're not required to. So for the FERPA exemption, that's a mandate, as is social security numbers. You can't disclose social security numbers, that's against the law. But some of the others are at the option of the board, and that would also include information subject to the attorney-client privilege. In some cases, the board may choose to waive attorney-client privilege on a particular document and choose to therefore release it to the public. Now, the full list is in Section 13 of FOIA. There's some in there that schools don't often deal with, like the exact location of archaeological dig sites. But these are the common exemptions that we see at the school level. But anytime you're reviewing a FOIA request, or anytime somebody at the district is reviewing a FOIA request, they have to look at what in here can be exempted and what in here is public information. And if there's something in there where we have a whole sheet and there's, up here is somebody's social security number, you wouldn't be able to withhold the whole sheet. You would have to redact just the social security number and provide the rest of the document, assuming that there wasn't something else in there that was exempt. So again, you may have to just black out items on there that are exempt and then provide the remainder of the document. You can't just withhold the whole document because some of it is exempt. A couple of recent cases, this one was from 2023, and it was a really interesting case because it dealt with whether somebody's name could be a public record or whether a public body could withhold a public employee's name. And the backstory here is, you may remember the case involving the U of M president, and there was, I believe, an affair of some sort with a subordinate employee. And a member of the public, that person's name, who the affair was with, was never made public. A member of the public sent a FOIA request to U of M trying to find out that person's name. And the university denied that request, and cited Section 13(1)(a), said that is information of basically it's information of a personal nature, and we're not going to disclose it. And the person sued and said, well, it's your name, it's not that personal. And the court sided with the university and said, generally somebody's name, it's on your driver's license, it's on your papers, on your presentation that you're giving to the board, it might be on a website, it's not generally considered private. But if your name, when linked with something else, like this particular situation, would provide intimate, embarrassing, private, or confidential information, and revealing that identity does not do anything to shed light on the inner workings of government, then in that case, you may be able to redact that information. And I actually have used, based on this case, used this exemption to redact names in a particular case in one FOIA request. So this has been helpful for schools when we have some concerns about somebody's name being released, because that release of that name could reveal that embarrassing or intimate information. So I put that out there. Another couple of cases. Back in 2010, so going back quite a ways, there was a case from the Michigan Court of Appeals, and this involved a FOIA request to a public school. It was the Howell Public Schools. And it was for union communications that were stored on the district's email server. And the district got the FOIA request and thought, it's on our server, I feel like we probably have to produce it. And the union was not happy with that. They said, no, you will not pull all of those communications from your server and then publicly produce them. We're not a public body, we're the union. And so there was a friendly lawsuit to get an opinion on whether or not those communications had to be disclosed. And the court said FOIA was not intended to render personal emails that happen to exist on the server public records just because they exist on the server. So that's helpful. But the reverse of that is also true. And that means you can't escape FOIA just by using a personal device or a personal email account. So it's not necessarily a public record just because it lives on the district server, but it's not a public record just because you use your own cell phone. And in 2022, we actually got a case that said exactly that. This FOIA request was for communications, including emails, texts, DMs, regardless of whether they were on a government-provided or personal device, service, or account. And the court said, yeah, the use of personal devices, services, and accounts in conducting official business is inconsequential under FOIA. And when I present on FOIA, I say, a Gmail account is free. And if it was that easy just to say, well, you don't have to follow FOIA if everybody just uses their own free Gmail account, we probably would have come up with that solution a while ago. But that's not the case. And so what I tell schools and what I tell board members is try and keep all your communications on your school-issued email or on your school-issued device, because when you get a FOIA request, it just makes your life a lot easier. You can have the tech department go in and pull everything instead of searching in 3 or 4 different places. So I think that's a good practice to get into, and it will save you some time down the road. A public body does have to respond to a FOIA request within 5 business days. Business days is every day, Monday through Friday, except state holidays. So even if we're closed for 2 weeks over Christmas break, or we have a couple of cold days, those still count as business days. It's just the state holidays and Saturday and Sunday that don't count when we're calculating response times under FOIA. And the only possible responses to a FOIA request are to grant the request, and that means I gave you everything you asked for and I made no redactions. To deny the request fully, which means you got nothing that you asked for, your request was fully denied. Number 3 is what we see more often, is a partial denial, a partial grant, because here's what you've requested. We had to redact a few things from it because there was some FERPA protected information, or there was a social security number in there, or something similar. And then we would have to issue that partial denial letter because they didn't get the full document. Or you can issue one notice extending the response time by not more than 10 business days. So you only get the 1 10 business day response. If the public body takes that, that means their FOIA response is due 15 business days from the date of receipt. You get the initial 5 plus 10. So FERPA, another law that we're going to talk about just really briefly as we wrap up here. It stands for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and it has a couple of purposes. First one, it allows parents and eligible students to access their students' education records or their own education records if they're 18. And it puts limits on when those records can be disclosed. And they can only be disclosed if we have prior written consent allowing disclosure, or if a consent exception exists. So there's a specific reason that allows us to disclose the student record information. Education records is defined really broadly. It's information that's directly related to a student and is maintained by a school or a party acting for the school. So, I mean, that could be a voicemail from a parent calling to talk about their kid. It could be an email about a student to another staff member. It's obviously things like report cards and IEPs and 504 plans. But when you think about that definition in the school sense, it is very broad. Is it directly related to a student, and is it maintained by the school? And if the answer is yes, then that's an education record. And if that's an education record, we have to pause before disclosing it to determine whether or not we're allowed to disclose it. If it is an education record, then we can disclose it to the kid's parent, or if the student is 18, to the student. If the disclosure is not being made to the parent or the adult student, we either have to have prior written consent from the parent or 18-year-old student, or a consent exception has to apply. Now, there's several consent exceptions in FERPA. Many of them you probably won't ever use. These are kind of the common ones that we have. The first is to other school officials with legitimate educational interests as determined by the school. And the way that I explain this to school administrators is school employees have to keep student information confidential, and they can only let other school employees know on a need-to-know basis effectively. So if the first hour teacher notices some issues with a student and wants to talk to the second hour teacher, say, hey, I've been noticing some struggles, have you been noticing similar things in your class? That's probably okay. But if the first hour teacher wants to go back and talk to the fourth grade teacher and gossip about what's going on with the kid and what they've observed in class, that's not okay. You can disclose student education records to other schools where the student seeks to enroll. So you get a records request, you legally have to send those on. You can, the third bullet is always interesting because this time of year we always start getting some crafty students who have looked into this a little bit. When a student turns 18, FERPA rights transfer to the student, and some students have asserted that that means that their parents don't get to see their report cards anymore, which might make their lives easier. However, under FERPA, there is a consent exception if it is a student in a K-12 institution who is still claimed as a dependent for purposes of taxes under the Internal Revenue Code. So I think it's safe to assume that if the kid is living with their parents, they're probably claimed as a dependent, and mom and dad, unfortunately for the student, still get to see the report card. For a health or safety emergency, you can disclose limited information while the emergency is ongoing. So if you need to disclose information to, diffuse a situation, or to assist with like a medical emergency, you will be all right disclosing that information during that health or safety emergency. Pursuant to a court order or lawfully issued subpoena, there are some other steps we have to take if we get a subpoena for student records, which might include notice to the parents. And if the information is what's called directory information, you can disclose it without consent as long as the parent hasn't opted out. Now, directory information is information that's in a student's record that is generally not considered harmful if it's disclosed. The board designates what's directory information through their policy, and parents are notified of that at the start of every school year, and they have the opportunity to opt out. But it's usually things like student name, student grade level, height and weight if they're members of sports teams, their picture when they're participating in school activities, honor roll, that type of stuff where we want to be able to publicize the good things that our students are doing. Parents do have the right to opt out though and say, I don't want any information about my kid disclosed. We do sometimes see that for safety concerns. They don't necessarily want their identity being out there publicly. So we have to make sure that we honor those opt-out requests, which happen at the beginning of the year. And I don't have anything else. Like I said, that was a really quick overview. I don't want to keep you guys here all night, but I did want to kind of give you the functional basics, enough to be dangerous. But if anyone has questions, I'm happy to take them. And if you think of one later and you want to funnel it through Ben, I'm happy to get a more detailed answer if it's something you want to ask about a specific situation.
Thank you, Jennifer. Mr. Mishner?
First question, what does the FERPA law consider or define parent as in terms of custodial or guardianship?
So it would be, parent is defined fairly broadly, and then there's also some Michigan law implications under there. Custody doesn't define parent. Basically, if it's a biological parent, they have FERPA rights unless we have a court order that expressly strips those FERPA rights. And I don't know that I've ever seen a court order that goes that far and says you have no access to your kid's education records, but I'm sure there's been one. And then if both parents are gone, for whatever reason, they're out of the state, they're out of the country, they're deceased, they're incarcerated, they're just not in the picture, then an individual basically standing in the place of a natural parent could be a parent for purposes of FERPA.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is a little bit more removed, but I'm just curious, as board members, are we considered mandated reporters like our teaching staff is?
Not under the child protection law, but I suspect your policy at least encourages everybody to report suspected abuse or neglect. I assume that's what you mean by
Correct.
mandated reporter, for purposes of child abuse or neglect. I don't believe board members are included in the definition of a mandated reporter under the child protection law.
Okay, thank you.
But you always can report. Anyone can report suspected abuse or neglect. But our teachers and administrators and a couple other people in the school setting are generally the only mandated reporters.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Jennifer. We always kind of rush you through this every year, so appreciate your concise and expedited explanations. My question is regarding student records and videos. There's always some issue on if we have something on video of one student performing an act that may cause disciplinary issues. Are other students in that video protected because of educational records?
Yep, so always depends on the context. It is an education record for any kid in the video that it's directly related to. So the example is the fight. So two kids get in a fight, and when two kids get in a fight, 20 other kids stand around and watch. The 20 other kids standing around and watching, it's not directly related to them because it's not specifically focusing on them. Their parents and them, they can't watch the video. The two kids involved in the fight, both of their parents can see the video. Neither of them can have a copy of the video unless we get consent from both parents. So,
But
yeah.
And the rest of the kids around, they considered,
Window dressing is the term that the feds use. Yes. Now, if there was something else in the, there's a kid who's window dressing, but for whatever reason, whatever the video shows could possibly disclose information about that student, that would be considered student record information. Maybe they're also engaged in some misconduct over in the corner. Best practice would be to try and redact that student to the extent possible. The best way that I've found to do that, and what I recommend school administrators do with security cameras, is when the parents come in to watch it, put a sticky note over the part where you don't want them to see the other kid who's standing in the corner doing something. That often works with a fixed video, but it's not always perfect. The guidance from the feds on this is if you can take steps to redact other student images, without it taking 300 hours and costing a whole lot of money, they do recommend doing that. For the two students who are in the fight, I always tell schools, I don't lose a lot of sleep over letting both of their parents see that video, even if you can't redact the other kid's face, because even if you have the best redaction software in the world, that kid knows that he got in a fight with Johnny, and so we know who the other kid is, and you aren't actually protecting their name or their information or their identity.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Any other questions? Okay.
All right.
Thank you. It's so great
Thank
to see you again. And
Always a pleasure.
if any board members have any further questions, you can just send them over through Ben and Sheila, and we'll get them over to Jennifer. Have a great night.
Thanks, you all as well. Happy New Year.
Thanks. We're going to move on to our second report to the board. We're having lots of fun tonight. We're going to talk about school safety and security update. Mr. Micah.
Yeah, thank you. So tonight we're going to hear from Mr. Heisman, and he's going to share some of the ongoing projects and work that we're doing throughout the district related to our safety and security. I will say you know, I know Dr. Carino's department, and which Dennis is a part of, they do a lot of really, really good work in this space, and so I want to just share some highlights of some of the things and our efforts in this area, and give the board an opportunity to ask questions and hear a little bit about the story of what's going on with school safety.
All right, good evening, everybody. Just wanted to go over some of the initiatives that we have completed here in the district last school year, and then some of the stuff we've been working on this school year as well. So as some of you may have known, I've started here in August 2023. So a lot of this work started before I got here, and some of it started after. So we're gonna go over a few of both of those pieces here. So one of the biggest things we did over the last school year is the Raptor Emergency Management. This is an app on the phone. All our staff members have this. It's an emergency button. It does apply, if you have heard of Alyssa's Law in some other states, this does apply, coincide with Alyssa's Law. So what that means is when an emergency button is hit, it automatically will inform law enforcement. So ours goes to our SROs. We do have the capability of switching that over to the central dispatch as well. So all our teachers have that. It's great in places that don't have good PA service, maybe a teacher's outside. This Raptor alert will go to their phone and alert them that there's an incident happening at the school. So you're not reliant on the cell phone or your walkie-talkie. You are getting information right to your phone. Something else that's in the Raptor Emergency app as well is our reunification. Last June, all the administrators in the district were able to go through a live reunification exercise with the I Love You Guys Foundation. They were on site. We were at the Roar Center doing reunification with all our staff and learning how to reunify parents with their loved ones after an incident. And after an incident, it could be gas leak, it could be a violent incident at a school, but this is how we are sure that we are getting the right kids back with the right loved ones at home. And what's nice about the app is it does streamline the system by going through electronically versus pen and paper and looking up things through clipboards and binders. We can really streamline the system and go pretty efficiently through it. Threat assessment training. This has been a big thing with a lot of school districts around the country when they do have an incident, a violent incident on their location, is there may have been a lack of threat assessment done, there may not have been an adequate one done or not one done at all. Me and our Director of Mental Health, Rosalie Johnson, have been working hard on this CSTAG, which is the Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines. We started working on this last winter. We realized it was something that we needed in our district to amp up. We were doing a good job already. We need to amp up our training for all our staff. So our ancillary staff, counselors, psychs, school psychologists, we're all going through this together, and then our administrators got this training as well. So we are trained up. That was our goal last year, and this year we're hoping to do that with our suicide assessments as well. So Zero-Wise, this is, you may have seen this on maybe the news or things online. Zero-Wise is an AI gun detection technology that we do have in the district. It does pick up on any weapon, firearm that is brandished. So if it's holstered, so if our law enforcement are walking through our hallways, it is not picking up on those weapons, but the minute it is brandished, so it is in the hand, it will pick up on that, and it sends alerts directly to our law enforcement and our administration that there is a gun detected on site. Our cameras have, throughout the district, 625 of our cameras have that AI system running through them. Yes, it's not all of them, but some of our cameras are looking at HVAC systems and other places that we wouldn't, need that system on there. But that is running. It's a great system. It's nice because it runs in the background. It's one of those things that opens up every day, and I know it's living out there, and I know that when they do get a hit, Zero-Wise does have 24/7 dispatch that is reviewing each hit that comes through. We have seen super soakers during the springtime when our kids are outside playing for end-of-school activities and stuff like that. But in our color guard as well, when they are practicing, we do get some hits on that stuff, but we are alerted to those, and we do find the information on that. The EOPs, or emergency operation plans, every 2 years we have to review and renew these EOP updates. So one was completed last year, which put us in compliance until next spring. State of Michigan decided to roll out a new template last August, so I am currently working on the new template for those as well. So our emergency operation plans are about 120 pages long. They go through pretty much every incident that could possibly happen on location and different steps to go through that. So those are currently being updated, and hopefully I will have those for everybody, hopefully by this summer, for your approval for next year. Before 2020, or the 23-24 school year, before that one started, we did complete an entire camera refresh around the entire district. We have 827 camera streams throughout the district, so we don't have that many physical cameras, but like in the picture here, this camera here has about 4 different views coming out of it, so that's actually 4 streams coming through. So it's efficient. We're using 1 camera, but we're getting 4 different views off of it. But we went through the entire district. Every camera is now 4K HD, it's high end. We can zoom in quite a ways. It's not like the old switch to VCR tapes out. We're recording digitally. And that refresh is complete. We're just picking up a few of the little, we just had a camera go out at Meadows the other day, and we're already switching that one out. So, but that is complete throughout the entire district. And we're getting ready for the new admin building and robotics center. We just, we're working on, we're getting the locations for all the cameras for those as well. Lockdown buckets, this was approved by the board, thankfully, last fall, because this is one of the biggest things that teachers were very happy to see. We had over 500 lockdown buckets for our district last year. What these are is during the extended time where students or staff can't leave the room, this provides some materials that they could use to get by. One of the big ones being a restroom. That is usually one of the biggest complaints. If a student or teacher is in the room for a long time, they want to know when they can use the restroom. So this bucket actually turns into a restroom. It has water, has food in there, has anything that you might need during an extended lockdown period. If it's a couple hours, this is something that they can use. Thanks to Mike Dragoo and his people, 2 semis showed up one morning. He called me and they had those all off the semis, and his people got those delivered to all the buildings as well. So it was very appreciative, because 500 buckets, you don't realize how many that is until they show up on a pallet with 2 semi trucks on Novi Road. Bloxy, this is probably one of my favorite, I would say favorite. It's probably one of the things that I didn't think was gonna be a big thing. Mr. Giramini came to my office my first fall here and said, listen, I have this thing, what do you think about you taking over it? Bloxy, if you don't know, it does run, teachers are able to use it in the classroom. They're able to observe what the students are doing on their district Chromebooks or tablets, and parents also have the access to this at home as well, and I know some parents take advantage of that. And it's nice because you can see what they're doing. We also have the student safety aspect of Bloxy, and what that does is it looks not on students, their personal phones, nothing like that. This is our district owned things only, and what it does is it looks for keywords, and those keywords are put in by Bloxy, so all those slang terms that we keep on hearing, those are updated constantly. I can put my own personal words in there too, that those get hit, and if that pops up on the screen of the student, so they don't have to even type it in, if any of those words pop up, an alert gets sent. We have flagged 380 students in the last year and a half with over 1,019 incidents. So this system is working. And I know the principals sometimes, I send them emails, hey, can you check on this student? And that's what we're doing, is we're checking on students to make sure they're okay. Because as you can see, 85.7% of our hits are mental health related. Only 14.3% are threatening behavior, or I'm gonna beat you up or something like that. So it really has shown that mental health in our district is very important. And it's one of those things that I didn't quite realize that the numbers were gonna be like this, especially the percentages. But it's definitely eye-opening to what our kids and what our students are going through these days. CRG mapping, this was grant funded a couple years ago. What this does is it takes aerial views, it puts all our important things on our maps, HVAC, our shutoffs, door numbers, and it puts it into a nice grid formation. So someone who's first responder is not familiar with our school district, we can say, hey, can you go to C3? Instead of saying, can you go to this door number? And these grid maps on here help our first responders, who they do have access to these maps, helps them locate where they need to go to versus trying to find on a map where I'm trying to direct them. So they are currently updating our maps this year for us as well with some of the new construction that we've had at the high school and then the new parking lot over at Parkview. Door system. This was completed this fall. Deerfield was our last school. Hope, thank goodness, a lot of the parts came in because they were stuck overseas. But we got all our parts in, so we are complete with our HS4 Celto door systems. Larry Mazzola has done an amazing job spearheading this campaign, keeping up on scheduling doors, making sure everything's opening when they're supposed to, and also repairing some things that may have gone awry during the installation. So that was complete this year. Still is working through, you'd be walking around and find a door that doesn't have one because it got missed, so we're still picking up those loose pieces, but this took over 2 years to implement in our district. And then some things this year, just to touch on, we started, Kathy Ferris and Danielle Stacer have been going around, and we are doing the medical emergency response team, so we have to have a cardiac response plan for all our school buildings. And what these teams are is they volunteer to be on these teams. The 3 of us will go to the buildings, we CPR certify them, an AED and first aid, and then we go through some drills on what a cardiac response looks like in that particular building. So we go to their building, we teach them, and then we run a drill in that building. So they're going to where the AED is. They're not using that AED, we're using a trainer, but they're going to where they need to in that building and learning where stuff is. So we have 2 more schools to go, and then we have all those schools complete for this year. I mentioned this a little earlier. In March, the Columbia University, they have the Lighthouse Project, and they do suicide risk assessment training. They will be doing a training with all our staff on suicide, what to look for, signs of suicide, and then they will also be going into teaching our ancillary staff and our admin how to complete an assessment when it comes to suicidal statements. And then I think this is the last one here, Raptor Student Safe. This last year we took our paper for process of doing threat assessments and suicide assessments. We moved that from a paper system to a digital system, which allows our staff, when they are completing an assessment on a student, to look at past assessments and see if this is a trend, learn some more about the student, and it digitally stores that information versus paperwork maybe getting lost in the shuffle as students move from building to building. And that is a quick overview of some of the things that we've done over the last 2 years here. And you guys have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Heisman. Just a reminder, before we go through the questions, we are going to have a school safety closed session, so just general questions here. When we review the audit, we can get into more specifics. So, Mr. Mishner?
Yes, just some general questions. So you mentioned the threat assessments training was the focus of last year, and focus this year is on suicide assessments. Policy 5710 and 5714 respectively deal with these, but they state trainings have to be conducted annually for all district employees. So are we going to do both concurrently? Just want to make sure we're managing both every year as opposed to this one this year and this one the next year, just so we're in compliance.
Yeah, luckily I am a CSTAG trainer, so we can run that training annually with our people.
Okay.
So I can get that whenever we do those annually with everybody. And luckily, it's just gonna be our crisis response team. So it's not the entire district that's getting the training, it's gonna be our teams that are getting that training who actually complete those assessments. The suicide assessment training is actually free. So from the Lighthouse Project, so that is another thing, and they do offer online modules for their training as well. So those are very easily done annually.
Okay, great. And then my last quick question is, we discussed, maybe some of you recall when we were talking about the buckets, about potentially having chargers or backup batteries, since the Raptor system does somewhat depend on the instructor's cell phones. Do we have those in the buckets? Did we make provisions for those to make sure all our staff has some way to charge if they're locked in a classroom for an extended period of time?
We've explored the options of them. Some of them get quite pricey when we start looking at those charging banks. So then there's very, very little room in those buckets. Before we got them, I thought we'd be able to stuff them with some of the stuff that we want to put in there, but the toilet paper roll is what the last thing that you can fit in those buckets as well. But we did explore, me and Mr. Michael did look into some of those phone charging banks, and they come out to be pretty pricey if we're starting to fill up 500 buckets with them. And they end up being almost more expensive than the bucket themselves.
Would cords be something we could do, like just a simple phone cord or something that is in each classroom maybe?
Yeah, so we can explore. Fortunately, a lot of the USBs are going to the same, was it USB-C now? So
Yes.
luckily our laptop chargers charge my phone, and it does a lot of that stuff too. So they're getting pretty universal.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Mrs. Bodwine?
First, in regard to what Mr. Mishner was saying, if we could do a cord, that would solve that problem entirely because there's almost always Chromebooks in the classrooms and those can charge your phone if there was an emergency and you can carry it around. But that was a really interesting question though. And then my second thing, I just wanted to thank you and Ms. Johnson for working together on this issue. This is something I care a lot about. Obviously, I know we all care a lot about school safety and mental health, but I think it's really elevated our response and the service the kids are getting and the staff when you two are working together. I don't think that having the school be completely safe and locked down and everything is, super secure and tight is always going to be the exact best option if that makes kids feel like the space is not safe. And so I think kind of combining the two things is really impactful. So I just wanted to thank you for that effort and working together on that.
Yeah, we actually shared the numbers with her today, and then she called a meeting with me next week to dive deeper into the numbers through Biloxi. So she was very taken aback by those numbers when I did pull those, and I think we want to dig deeper to see what is our root cause with a lot of that mental health.
Well, and it's really important that the kids are physically safe and that they also feel safe.
Yes.
So we have, to really combine that. So it's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a quick one.
Sure.
In your medical emergency response team training, does that include training for food allergy reactions and anaphylaxis and things like that?
Yep, we go over the policy on Narcan and our EpiPens. We actually have trainers that they can train on themselves. And we do discuss the how to use EpiPen, when to use them. Kathy Ferris and Danielle Stace are doing an amazing job. They have the expertise in that system, so I let them take those roles, but they do a great job going through those teams on how to use those things.
One thing I just would like to highlight in closing the presentation is just that when you think about all of the things that was just presented, those are critical things that keep our children and our staff safe. And prior to having Dennis's role in this district, it was either not happening or it was farmed out to somebody that already had 100 different things on their plate. So the fact that we have the support of this board and this community and having a role like Dennis's, we really have led the way. There's other districts that are now adding this role because they understand the need for such a thing. But it's kudos to the work that Dennis does every day, but also to help bring awareness for everybody that schools do a lot more than just teach math and reading. We have a lot of things to consider when we think about the complexities, and this is great work, and I can confidently say, and Dr. Carino would reiterate that Dennis is not the type of person that's going to not continue to look at what's in the future and keeping us safe and what's the latest and greatest out there. And so we definitely appreciate not only your role here, but how you execute it as well. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Micah. Mr. Mena has one more thing.
No, really, I only had comments. I didn't have any questions, and you pretty much covered what I was going to say probably a lot more eloquently, if I may add. But it's clear to me that we're getting a lot of value out of this role. If that question was ever out here, I think that tonight's presentation pretty much proved that out. So thank you for all the stuff that you do. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you.
right,
And we'll
thank
see
you.
you in a little while. Jump
All
over
right.
here. We are going to move on to celebrations. So we don't have any specific celebrations, and we do have opportunity for board communication. If anybody has anything that they want to share, we can do that right now. Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to comments from the audience. If anybody would like to make a comment to the audience, please fill out a card and give that to Sheila. I don't see any up here. Yes?
Just a quick question, are we doing board communication at the end, or is that the sum total?
We will do the board communication prior to the closed session. Is that what you wanted to know?
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Not at the very end, not literally at the end.
Yes.
Okay, we are gonna move on to the consent agenda. And tonight on the consent agenda, we have approval of the bills, the board report for November 2024, check register for November 2024, purchase card report for November 2024. We have approval of the minutes from the regular board meeting, January 9th, 2025. We have approval of 2 field trips, the first Robotics World Championship trip and the MHSAA Winter 2025 overnight trips. If I can get a motion, Mr. Cook?
I move that the board approves the consent agenda as presented.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Cook and supported by Mrs. Roney. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to our action items. We have 4 action items this evening. We will start with Personnel Report A, Mr. Micah.
Thank you very much. I will turn it over to Dr. Carino.
Thank you. Good evening. Tonight we have several recommendations for your consideration. We recommend Samantha Dynick for a 4th grade teacher position at Orchard Hills. Samantha recently graduated from Gannon University and completed her student teaching in Erie, Pennsylvania. We also recommend Haley Washington for the care leader position at Deerfield. Haley has previous experience as an assistant teacher at Kinder Care in White Lake. Finally, we have a request for a child care leave of absence for Amy Brown, a 1st grade teacher at Orchard Hills, and this concludes tonight's personnel report day.
Thank you, Dr. Carino. If I can get a motion? Mrs. Bodwine?
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education adopt the personnel report recommendations as presented.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Bodwine and supported by Mrs. Kleber. Any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Shortest one in a while.
We'll move on to, actually, do you want to wait until we're done with the second one, or is, okay. We'll move on to Personnel Report B. Mr. Micah.
Personnel Report B, typically for our administrative hires, and we're excited to bring a new person into our district tonight. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Carino.
For Personnel Report B, we are excited to recommend Heidi Phelps for the Coordinator of Special Education Transition Services position. Heidi comes to us with a great deal of special education experience, previously serving as a special education teacher and eventually the special education department chair in Saline area schools. We are excited to welcome her to Novi, and this concludes this evening's Personnel Report B.
Thank you, Dr. Carino. If I can get a motion, Mr. Cook?
Recommend that the Novi Community School District Board of Education approve this hire as noted above.
Support.
Ooh, recommended by Mr. Cook and supported by Mr. Mena. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. I will turn it back over to Dr. Carino.
Thank you. We are excited that Heidi Phelps is here this evening, so I would welcome her up to the podium.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you for having me here today. I'd like to say just thank you for the opportunity of working in Novi districts. I've heard great things. Today was the first day on campus, so that was an interesting start to the position, coming in on a Thursday for a whole week, but it was nice to get going, meeting the students, meeting the staff. The school district seems outstanding, so I'm excited for the opportunity to support the students and families of Novi community.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to our third action item, which is the district negotiation team members. Mr. Micah?
Yeah, so this essentially is an opportunity for us to have the negotiation teams established by the board. We are negotiating with the NTA this year as well as the maintenance group. And so that is there for your approval this evening.
Thank you very much. If I can get a motion for, I think we can just do a summary motion. It's a long resolution. Do you guys see it?
Oh, I do see it
Yep.
here. But there's not a motion written out, but I move that we present this as presented in our, or I'm sorry, I move that we approve this as presented in our resolution.
Thank you. Do we have support? No, yeah. Anybody?
Support.
Okay. I didn't see you raising your hand.
It's okay, no, I wasn't.
Oh, okay. Recommended by Mrs. Bodwine and supported by Mrs. Roney. Does anybody have any questions? I know that we had asked, just for some language in the event a staff member who was listed here, was no longer here, that we didn't go out of compliance, and I see that that's added, so that's perfect, so.
We actually kept both the names and the positions to try and accommodate both of the requests from the board.
Yeah, that was great, and then I see that little blurb that was put in there as well, so. Mr. Mishner?
And just want to confirm with the maker of the motion, by we you mean the Novi Board of Education?
Yes, the Novi Board of Education, my
Thank you.
apologies, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We will move on to our final action item for this evening, and it's the discussion about or the approval of pursuant of a no increase 2025 millage approval. Mr. Micah.
Yeah, so the resolution that's there for your consideration today has been discussed for probably the better part of 3 months. We had a formal discussion at, a board meeting in December. We briefly discussed it in January. But this, essentially the resolution as it is presented tonight for your consideration is to authorize the district to start making arrangements to pursue a no increase millage in November of 2025. This resolution does not stipulate the terms, the ballot language, any of the details. It's just simply kind of as a board, as a public body saying, yes, we would like to pursue that, and then directs the administration to begin the pursuit of collecting data, doing all of the background work that we've started to continue that, and ultimately to prepare the documents necessary for the board to make that decision, or make the decision on the ballot language and things like that. So those votes will come later in the year as those are presented, and we'll have many opportunities to discuss it as a group, but this is just to continue to say, yes, we want to pursue this, and it's reflected as about what the district has done every 5 to 6 years. The first, or if you just go back into recent history, 2014, we did another one in 2019, here we are in 2025. So this is essentially your authorization for us to continue to move forward and pursue this, and then obviously there'll be much more discussion coming forth after that.
Thank you, Mr. Micah. Mr. Mena?
Yeah, this is an action item, right? So I move that the board approve the pursuit of a no increase 2025 millage approval.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Mena and supported by Mrs. Roney. Any questions or comments? No? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. And we look forward to future conversations with our community and focus groups and things like that to go into more detail on this.
Great.
Okay, so we are going to move on. We have 2 information and discussion items. One is the 2025 bond program construction manager discussion. Mr. Micah.
Thank you. So you recall that earlier in this past year, and I know Ms. Kleber, you have been aware and seen, that we have, in talking about the potential of going out in 2025, we really wanted to front load and identify who would be our partners related to designing our plan. Plant Moran Real Point was our first process that we actually did a competitive bid. The award was given to Plant Moran Real Point, of course, and then from there was a discussion about how there would be a myriad of additional partners that would need to come on board to help us with an effort of this magnitude. We secured King, Scott, and Fielding. It was one of the first groups that we brought on board. As conceptual plans start to be developed, which are in an ongoing state, we're going to need to get to a point where we put numbers to these decisions, right? We're going to need to know how much do things cost. So you might wonder, why would we want to think about the construction manager? We're not building anything yet related to the 2025 program. But it's very beneficial to bring a construction manager on early, because depending on who the construction manager is, they have very robust cost estimating teams, and they have the ability to be able to look at a conceptual plan and then put a number to it. So as you're making decisions as a board, you might say, well, I'd like to have this versus this instead of this, but if you knew this cost an astronomically larger amount of money, that would factor into your decision. So that's one of the main reasons that you want to bring the construction manager on around this time. So we conducted an interview process, a little different than the architect, but we invited 4 of what I would call the top construction firms out there in the space, including our current one, and we asked for them to provide and submit an interview on their background, their quality of work, and so on and so forth. I'd like to just touch on our recommendation and that is that we move forward with the Chrisman Company. The Chrisman Company is a construction firm that's got a storied history. They've been around for a very long time. They're headquartered out of Lansing, and they do a very large amount of work in the school space, as well as commercial and industrial construction. They actually have a whole branch of their company that's into timber and forestry, so you may see Chrisman Construction and those types of spaces. They're a very large company that have the ability to do self-perform work, as well as engage in large-scale projects of this magnitude. But I think one of the things that stood out to us, the level of technology and sophistication of their company related to going into a very complicated project. They have a very large-scale federal court building that they did in Detroit, where they had to maintain the court running its business while also doing detailed construction right in the center of that. And that was one of many, many projects that were very sensitive and technical. And when we think about our high school, one of the things that's going to have to be a consideration is how do we maintain safety, but also how do we allow for the school experience to be a positive one while that's going on. Ms. Cicluna was in the interviews as well, and she made a comment about how her kids are going to go through this, and how that was a real strong consideration for us, is their expertise in doing very technical and complex projects. Technology was also a really impressive thing that they brought to the table, just the ability for them to use AI and other things to make them more efficient. Things like walking through a construction site and being able to video regularly the walls and everything that are happening, so that when you have a completed project, you can just scroll back and see where maybe there was a wire, or maybe there was conduit that was running. Those things are a fresh take on their work. They're very capable, and they brought a tremendous amount of experience to the table. So this is here for info and discussion. The goal would be that at the February board meeting to have it for your consideration for approval. I know that Mr. Donnelly is here. He sat on the interview. I know that Ms. Cicluna was in the interview as well. Mike Dragoo is also a part of the interview process. I don't know if you have any questions for any of the 3 of us while we're here, but we're open for questions or discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Micah, and we'll start with Ms. Bodwine.
Just a question on how this all works with this. So our last item we discussed with the asking for the bond. In the event that the bond did not pass, what obligation would we have to the construction manager?
You'd have none if it doesn't pass. I think there's going to be some billable hours on like an as-needed basis if we're asking them to estimate something. But for example, if the bond doesn't pass, then they're not actually overseeing work, they're not overseeing construction at that point. Really, it's an interesting space because we're doing it proactively. But the risk for them is that they're assigning kind of their top tier people with the understanding that they're gonna help us, hopefully get the community on board, and if that doesn't happen, then obviously they're out as well, so.
Thank you. Any other questions right now? I mean, certainly if anything comes to mind that you need further information regarding, you can send over to Ben. We can make sure you get that information. Mr. Cook, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand there.
No, that's fine. I'm just curious as to, this is your ultimate recommendation, but what set them apart from the second place or the third place recommendation?
Sure.
Or third place
Yeah,
position?
it's a great question. So, four very capable firms. I think when we did our analysis after the interviews, there was one that was clearly not the right fit, and, you know, for a number of reasons. So I'll tell you that some of the objective criteria that we looked at was their ability to do what was called a CMC versus a CMA contract. And so just to try and put that into perspective, the company has to be, any construction project in Michigan, the contractors have to be bonded. It's basically our insurance company. And so the district has an opportunity to either hire a construction manager who doesn't share the risk of bearing the contracts with the subcontractors. The district does. That's a CMA. The district has done that in the past. With something of this magnitude, we were looking for opportunities to reduce our risk and also give the construction manager the opportunity to hold the contracts with the subcontractor. That would be a CMC type contract. And so we were looking for companies that had the capacity to do that. There were two of the four that had the capacity to do that effectively, and Chrisman was one of those. We're also looking for which company has the ability to best self-perform work. And what I mean by that is a project's not going well, you need to bring in somebody last minute who has an internal bench, if you will, to be able to come in and actually perform the job to hit a timeline. Everything in school construction is about meeting deadlines, and so that was an important piece to us. We experienced some of that last year, and we want to try and see if there's a way that we can really address that. And I think that, you know, Chrisman has a very, very strong self-perform arm. The Chrisman Construction Group is actually part of the parent company, but it's their contractor side. So they actually do bid on, you know, packages that other schools will put out, whether they're the construction manager or not. So the ability to self-perform was something. I think the third criteria we looked at is their demonstrated experience working on complex projects while school is going on. And there were two companies, again, that really showed that. And then the fourth was the ability for customer service and kind of the you know, integrity of the company and so on and so forth. Their testimonials from other clients and other districts. Chrisman certainly was very, very strong there. So I think there were three that could have done the job very well. I think Chrisman shined in those four areas kind of above, you know, above and beyond the others. And so that was kind of how we came to that conclusion.
Yeah, that's good for now.
Okay.
I do
Something
think
else
at the Capital Projects Committee, I think we're gonna wanna have deeper dialogue around the different types of ways that we could structure that CMA versus CMC and so on and so forth. But it is absolutely the case that it does reduce the district's liability and probably helps with efficiency if you have a company that can assume that risk and then take that off of the district. And so, you know, as I said before, this is gonna be, you know, a fairly large-scale project. So that's something that we'll be able to discuss more and, you know, at future board meetings, but also at the CPC committees.
Thank you, Mrs. Roney.
Just one quick question. What, have they worked on any schools like in the area or anything?
Yes, they have. They've done a lot of work for the University of Michigan. They've done Okemos schools. They have a number of districts out this way. I don't know, Mr. Donnelly, if you have like a short list off the top of your head that you can rattle off, but.
The immediate area, I do not. I can tell you that they're probably in 20 to 30 different districts right now. One of the more notable projects that they've recently completed, which is not a K-12 project, but they were the CM on the Detroit train station renovation. So that's
Oh, okay.
a monumental project, so they're very capable.
Okay, thank you.
There were some references in the.
Yeah, that's what Paul just said.
presentation. Mason, Clausen, Okemos, Dundee, I think.
Looks like an auditorium in the Lansing area. So that would-
Any other questions or comments? Good. Okay, I would just like to say I love the proactivity. I think that it's important that we do get a construction management team together as we work forward and go towards the bond. I think it's important when the stakeholder meetings, and in the past, other people have sat on bond committees much longer than I have, but in the past, I know that we've had all of our important people who are gonna, implement this and see it to completion in the room to hear what the stakeholders' ideas are moving forward into a bond. So although it may seem premature, I think it's important to have the right teams on board, so.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, if any questions come about, you certainly can just send them over to Ben and get them answered so that you're ready to take action moving forward at their next meeting. We'll just move right into our next information and discussion, which relates to this, and that's the 2025 Bond Program Municipal Financial Advisor discussion.
Yeah, so similar to the discussion that we just had, there are a number of partners, as I said before. One of the things that has to happen is you also need to have a municipal financial advisor. Your municipal financial advisor is your partner who is running actuarial tables, who's looking at if this amount was levied over this amount of series, over this amount of time, this is what that would, net you. You could structure it differently. You can have, take it out for this many years versus this many years. And so they work really hand in hand. Ms. Cicluna had the opportunity to interview the people, the two firms that put a bid in this space. Baker Tilly is a very reputable firm. They came in at a very competitive price point. And in addition to that, they offer a tremendous amount of investment advising as well. So when we think about, you take a series of bond, and we did the bond sale last year, which was the final series for the 2019 bond. When you take those dollars in, you don't just put them under your mattress, right? You actually want to invest them because then you can take the earnings on those investments and then do more construction projects. And so they specialize in that area for schools. They're very customized around the school district, and so they have great customer service. And so we actually took the bids on this prior to Ms. Cicluna starting, and we held off because we really wanted to make sure that she had an opportunity to dig into the proposals, see who she felt most comfortable with, and so again, it's here for just info and discussion tonight with the hopes that you'll consider approval at the February meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Micah. Mr. Misher?
Were either of the two companies that bid involved in our last round of bonds for 2019?
Yes, yep. There was the other company was involved with us before. There are two primary groups or companies that are in this particular space. I'm sure that there are other smaller outfits that can do this, but when you're doing something of this size, you're really looking at one of two kind of firms. One of the firms is a little bit more, they do a lot of schoolwork, they do a very good job, we've had great experience with them. We felt really strongly about the price point that Baker Tilly came in at, which was lower. And they also offer that strong investment advising, and so had good experiences and great testimonials from them as well. So, but yes, we have worked with the other firm as well.
Do we have any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, this will come back to us. I want to publicly thank Mr. Donnelly. I know that as our owner's rep, that you and your team and Mr. Van Kirk and everybody over there kind of lead the way with this interview team. And although, we make it sound so easy and have a 5-minute conversation up here and maybe some, do our own due diligence, you guys are always the boots on the ground and doing all the work to make sure that we are getting the right people on the bus, if I can say. to make sure that our bond and our, innovative projects are successful. So thank you for your time, and thank you, Mrs. Cicluna and Mr. Dragoo, and everybody who was involved in the interviewing process. We appreciate you.
You're welcome, thank you.
I'm sorry.
You have a question?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back and answer the same
It's going
question.
backwards.
What brought this firm to the top versus the other one, or was it a flip of a coin?
It wasn't a flip of the coin for me, but I'll let you kind of share, and then I'll piggyback on any comments that you'd like to make on it.
Yeah, I mean, I had the opportunity to sit down with both firms. I can't say anything bad about either one of them. They were friendly and customer service oriented. I'm going to be working with this team for years because I intend on being a part of the district for years. So having transparency and a willingness to jump in and pick up the baton and start running really made a difference for me, especially being new to this environment. And there was a clear winner for me in who came to the table, willing to serve, willing to help me in all different areas. Baker Tilly walked me through their presentation and offer really a full suite of services, and they've already assisted me in identifying different opportunities with transportation, with savings, with a potential chiller purchase, even before coming to the table presented to you for information and discussion. So they're already, jumping in and assisting me in identifying different ways that the district may save money and everything else. So it's a clear winner for me, and I think that they'll continue to do that. They really, really wanted this partnership. And so I think we're all hoping that it comes through and it gets approved.
Yeah, and I would just agree with everything she said, and also I think it's interesting when you go to actually RFP these different partners. There's some that are, really hungry, and so they come with a very competitive pricing point, and certainly Baker Tilly did that. And then they also, as she said, jump in and they offer, they're hungry for the partnership, and so they bring, I guess, a level of passion and interest and maybe a more broad scope of services to the table than the previous did. But I can't say anything negative about the previous experience at all. But this was a very clear-cut winner, in our opinion, related to the way that they engaged with us through the process. And obviously, anytime we can save, 6 figures plus of fees, that's more things that we can build and construct as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not asking you to say anything, bad about one company versus the other. I just wonder why, one rose to the top.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Where they, excelled.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's a great question, and I think those are important questions. And Baker Tilly, I think, will do a great job for the district. And they have worked with a lot of districts like Novi, I guess is what I would say. So they serve.
Districts like Novi.
Well, that's true. But if you were to consider who we would closely consider our peers, basically districts 2 through 9. You would find that Baker Tilly works with a lot of districts like ours in a more customized fashion. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Micah.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other comments or questions? No, you're fine. Thank you for asking. It gave us all a lot of information, so helpful. Okay, we will move on to the superintendent's report. Mr. Micah.
Thank you. It's been a very interesting week. Today was the first day of school this week, and we had a couple cold days. I think the kids were more than excited. All of the emails that I get from the students finally paid off for them. And so we had a couple very frigid days. Today was dicey as well. A number of the northern Oakland County schools closed today as well, so they will have just one day of school this week in many cases. Want to draw your attention to, I know you've seen the communications coming out, but we have parent camp this weekend. I'm very excited to see what Dr. Carino's team and Ms. Johnson have pulled together. We do have the Positivity Project coming in to help with the sessions. I would say, Mrs. Lephart and a lot of the people that are a part of the Novi Mental Health Alliance have done a really nice job creating some very valuable sessions. We have really good response to the turnout so far on the RSVPs, but even if you didn't RSVP, we'd love to see you Saturday morning at 9 a.m. at the high school. The Positivity Project, while we're on that, we're going to be doing a podcast on that tomorrow, which will air next week. And it's been a very, very, very soft rollout this year. You've heard us talk about not wanting to overwhelm people, you know, being mindful and cognizant of where people are at. But we have, you know, some teachers that have taken the baton and run with it. We've had some that have been, I'm not really touching that yet, and that's okay. But there's starting to be some buzz about, you know, the different, you know, Positivity Project traits. And so we're preparing for what that launch really next year would look like with families and branding and all those types of things. We had a unified basketball game against Brighton at the high school this afternoon, so that was exciting. And of course, this is the new semester, so it's always an opportunity for new beginnings. And believe it or not, we're, you know, the way that the school year goes, I think for parents and students, they're just living in, you know, what the semester is, what the moment is. But as a school district, we are already actually planning for 25-26 and all of the things that we are looking to put in place. And it's just the way that it goes. Once you get to end of first semester, you're thinking about the next year and everything that you have to roll through. So while we'll finish strong, we're already in planning stages for next year. So exciting time. Thank you for all of your support as always, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Micah, although that's very sad. You just rushed our timeline, but we're gonna move on. Ms. Cicluna.
Yes, our food service team has made substantial investments in the high school. They have actually implemented a new and improved deli station, a wild greens and smoothie station, and a grill and build station. I share this because this investment was a part of the spend down plan that the board approved last year in July. It was a hefty investment. I was sent some pictures from Kim, our director of food service. The areas look amazing. If you want to see pictures, I can send you the PowerPoint she put together, but it looks fantastic and it's going to give our kids an opportunity to eat new and different foods in a better, cleaner setting. The maintenance team has been working tirelessly. We all know what the weather's been like this week, since this is the first day back, to ensure our buildings are warm, especially in the frigid cold. And the parking lots and sidewalks are salted and ready for students and teachers. They've probably been working more now than they have in maybe prior years because of the weather and snow. And then just as information, it's about that time of year where the person in my position presents to you an amendment for the budget. I've been working on it and really hoping to wrap it up in the next week to present to you guys for information and approval next month in February.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Dr. Carino.
Thank you. I would like to first thank Mr. Heisman for his great presentation this evening. He's been working super hard, and I appreciate your recognition of his efforts. We started a staff wellness challenge a couple weeks ago when we returned from winter break. So I would like to thank Ms. Johnson for her efforts in getting our staff active. We are currently doing a step challenge, and so as of the first week, we had 18,915,717 steps that our staff have taken. So they are very passionate about this. We have people walking all over the place. I'm sure they took advantage of the cold days and were on their treadmills, and some people even posted pictures of running and walking their dogs out in the freezing temperatures just to get steps in and get some fresh air and focus on their wellness. So we're grateful to her for organizing that, and staff is very excited about kind of coming together. They're working together in buildings and departments to get averages, and we will be awarding prizes to the highest building or department at the end of the conclusion of the challenge. So we're excited about that. As Mr. Micah shared, we're excited about Parent Camp on Saturday. There are breakout sessions that are focused on trauma, stress, anxiety, empowering kids to have resilience. So we think it's going to be a great presentation for families. It's also great for educators, so we welcome any staff member to join us. It's not only for parents in the district, but we're really excited at the opportunities that we're going to provide. I have been reviewing Educator of the Year nominations, so we are excited to bring those forward in the coming weeks and months. It's one of the best things to be able to read about our amazing staff and the colleagues that have recommended them, so we're looking forward to surprising our winners and announcing those in the next few weeks. We will be starting a staff retention task force, so we will first be meeting with administrators, followed by actual staff members throughout the district on a task force to hear firsthand what we think as a district is important and what our staff values that would make them feel important and want to stay with our district for their entire career. We're also starting a staff wellness committee to also hear about initiatives they would like us to bring forward, to see if they want more of things like the STEP challenge or different strategies that we can use to build staff wellness. And we are excited about our wellness center. We saw beautiful renderings from our designers that really just make it feel palpable and that it is coming. So we're doing a lot of planning. We'll be meeting with our governance and policy committee to bring forward some initial draft language for some wellness center policies, and we'll be presenting to the board later this spring once more definitive plans are finalized. And as Mr. Micah shared, we are already starting to think about next year. We'll be looking at what job fairs we're going to and our hiring cycle, believe it or not, in not too long. So things are up and running.
Busy.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Carino. Yeah. Mr. Giarmini.
Thank you, Dr. Ruskin. You guys are stressing me out with all the talk next year. I'm surprised you weren't pacing around to get your steps up.
Later.
I am particularly excited to officially have the Teaching and Learning Department at full capacity now. You met Laura Bidlack in December and you met Heidi Phelps tonight. They have already both demonstrated that they are amazing contributors and teammates. Just super excited to have them help us maintain our positive forward progress. The end of next week, next Friday, marks the end of our winter iReady window. That week, our principals will actually be engaging in data dives with iReady consultants and really looking at their building level data. And then the following week, we will engage in our district level dive. And then we should have a report for you in February so that we can take a look at progress, areas of focus, and do the usual reflection that we do. I know that lots of district communications have gone out, but I want to remind us that on February 11th, we are holding a WIDA Day. WIDA is the assessment that our English learner students take. It's a big deal. It's a state assessment. It's absolutely required for those students who are identified as English learners, including students who might not be receiving services. And we think that this approach is going to provide a better testing environment for those students and also allow us to dedicate our staff more effectively to maintaining service throughout the window for that assessment. Our non-English learner students will be engaged in an asynchronous virtual learning day, and additional details about that will come from the schools and teachers themselves. So excited to try this new approach. Think it's pretty innovative, gives us an opportunity to do it a little bit differently, and obviously improve things for next year. So that's all I have.
Perfect. Thanks, Mr. Giarmini. We will move on to board communication. If anyone from the board has anything that they would like to share. Mr. Mishner?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I had the pleasure and privilege to attend the Martin Luther King celebration at the Novi Public Library. I was one of several elected officials in attendance, and it was really nice to represent us, the school board, at that event. And also note, it was also attended by at least one Novi Community School District student. There were some other students in attendance, and hopefully, more students will take advantage of that opportunity in the future. But it was a fantastic event, a day of celebration and reflection, and as always, the library does a really good service for putting that event on for the community. So it was a great event. So glad I was able to attend.
Thank you. Any other board communication? Okay. Dr. Carino, if any of the board members want to just stop by on Saturday, are we allowed to do that? If we don't sign up, we can. Is it a 9 to 12 for parents who do sign up, or families or staff?
Yeah, so 9 o'clock is a breakfast, 9:30 is the keynote speaker from the Positivity Project, and then we will go into the breakout sessions for the remainder of the morning.
Okay, great.
Yeah, you're
Thank
all
you.
welcome.
Mr. Cook?
I'm sorry, I do know somebody that needs a big thank you, and that's Mr. Drago and his team, keeping the heat on, even though the kids weren't here. If not, we probably would be freezing up here right now, so thank you, Mr. Drago and team.
Thank you. Any other board communication? Yes, please.
I almost forgot, also, the last lower elementary school multicultural night is coming up on January the 30th. It's at Woods from 6 to 8:30, so encourage the community to come out and attend. And that'll put us above the 50% mark for all of our educational K through 12 buildings, so I'm excited to attend that event at the end of this month.
Perfect. So next Thursday, correct?
That is correct, next Thursday.
All right, thank you. All righty, so we will now go into closed session, and if I can get, yes,
Motion?
a motion? You are eager beaver over here.
I recommend that the Novi Community School Board of Education moves into closed session for the purpose of negotiations in school safety under OMA Section 8(1)C and K.
We have support,
Support.
recommended by Mr. Cook and supported by Mrs. Roney. If I can get a roll call vote, Mr. Mishner?
Absolutely. Trustee Beaudoin.
Yes.
Trustee Beaudoin says yes. Trustee Cook.
Yes.
Trustee Cook says yes. Trustee Klebert.
Yes.
Sorry. Trustee Klebert.
Yes.
Trustee Klebert, yes. Trustee Mena.
Yes.
Trustee Mena, yes. Trustee Mitchner, yes. Trustee Roney.
Yes.
Trustee Yoni says yes. Trustee Ruskin.
Yes.
Trustee Ruskin, yes.
Okay, motion carries 7-0. We're gonna go into closed session, and just so everybody knows, there'll be no further business when we come out. We are going in for information discussion, and when we come out, we will be adjourning our meeting.
Dr. Ruskin, can we have a couple minute recess?
I'll think about that. Okay.
Take a couple minutes and take a